Freddie was my dad, and I worshipped him. And when he started having children of his own with my mother, I never felt for one moment pushed out of the family group.
My father was such a lot of fun. That's my main memory of him.
I can't really remember as a child him without the camera in his hand. He would film everything. And thank God for it, because now, all these years later, we can see Freddie whenever we like.
He had been a world champion boxer.
Mills, brilliant, absolute phenomenon.
Mills is the winner! Mills has put up one of the most magnificent fights I've ever seen.
Nothing has thrilled me quite so much before I took up boxing nor since. The thrill of swapping punches under arc lights, the spotlights, the fanfares, the publicity, the slaps on the back, the handshakes, everything that goes with it. It's a wonderful game.
Loved and admired from people in Britain and all over the world.
It's a game which chases you halfway around the world, and you meet 1,001 people.
He did films, TV, just a general all-round good guy. It's unfortunate that his final day always takes up the story. One day of his life.
I remember saying, oh, Daddy, don't go tonight. Please stay home with us. Please stay home. And it's funny because of what did transpire that night. I'm not saying that I had a premonition or anything, but it's funny that I would say that evening.
Okay, what happened on the night? What happened on the night? My wife Kate and my mother were at home, and we were going to go to the club that night. So the three of us get in the car, we drive over to the club, and there was his lovely silver Citroen DS 19. And I could see him sitting in the back seat behind the passenger seat. I went round into the darkness. I opened the door and hit him on the knee and said, "Come, Fred, come on, time to get up."
So I opened the door to get into the car, and I can't get close enough to him. So there's something between us. I immediately turned around and I screamed at Donnie, "It's a gun! Get the police! Get an ambulance!"
There was a goblet of blood that had congealed and was hanging out of his eye. And I went, bang, he's dead.
Freddie Mills.
I think it hit the news on the radio. We was in the Old Kent Road somewhere. I was sitting in the back seats. It was a massive shock. I can remember that day. It's like I can remember when Kennedy got killed, you know, so it was one of those things that sort of holds on to my memory. It was massive news. It sent a shock through the nation. It was a household name.
The 1960s was kind of the heyday of celebrity culture emerging in the UK. You've got a big celebrity who's died under sort of fairly unusual circumstances. People want to know what really happened.
There was a split. Some people thought he took his own life. Other people thought he'd been murdered.
There are enormous challenges when it comes to looking at a crime such as the death of Freddie Mills, which occurred 50 years ago. It happened in an era which is completely different from today. We're talking about criminals ruling an entire area of London. We're talking about police taking bribes left, right and centre. And we're talking about a famous guy within the boxing world and the show business world.
There I was, sat in the corner, blood all over the place. All mine. I feel a lot happier here this evening. Well, I mean, that sort of thing couldn't happen to me here tonight. Could it?
Freddie Mills' death was surrounded in gossip, rumour, innuendo. It was natural. There's so many people believe the dangers involved with boxing may ultimately have cost him his life. It was alleged that the main thing was his fame. He really was as famous as David Beckham, and it made him very naive, and in a way it made him vulnerable. And then also possibly being killed by mobsters who were annoyed because he didn't pay the protection money. And then into this mix, this is a guy who's been accused of being a serial killer. It's a never-ending saga in a sense, and it makes it very difficult to investigate. You have to somehow dissect it and take all those red herrings out, throw them, put them to one side and stick to what are the facts.
He loved boxing, absolutely. You know, it cost him a couple of broken ribs and a broken nose and cauliflower ear and, you know, teeth lost, I'm sure. But he knew that he was born to do that, definitely.
He turned professional in 1936. He was 16 years old. In the 20s and the 30s. One way of learning your trade was to join a boxing booth.
Fairground booths were marquees with a boxing ring in, and people used to pay to go in and watch the fight. You'd have a guy outside that would be touting the business.
And they would be challenging the local tough guys to stay 2 or 3 rounds with a professional fighter. And if they did so, they would be given £5. Freddie Mills joined up with Sam McEwen's booth and toured all around the West Country. Freddie would be earning money on a Friday and Saturday night on the booths, and then maybe on the Monday night taking a fight against a local professional. Very quickly was winning 5 out of every 6 bouts he took part in, through to when the war started, really.
A state of war once more exists between Great Britain and Germany. The personnel of the defence forces has increased rapidly in the face of danger. Britain is ready to inspire that utmost confidence which we know to exist in these isles.
Boxing was really big during the Second World War as a means of keeping men fit, getting the fighting spirit and pluck and courage and strength and all these things you want soldiers to have. Freddie had a pretty successful wartime career. He was getting regular fights even though he was a serviceman. and using his leave, not that he would have had much leave, but he was using virtually all of it to take fights. And this was greatly encouraged by the forces at the time. The idea that active servicemen could be seen as successful professional sportsmen was good for morale.
He built up a following because he was knocking everybody out.
Boxing is the most brutal of sports. It's the bravest, it's terrifically exciting, not everybody's cup of tea. It's a brutal sport. It certainly was in 1943, 44, 45. Referees were less lenient than they are today. There was less protection, there was less concern for the fighters.
No boxer that I've ever known has earned his money the harder way than Freddie Mills. He didn't just have fights, every battle was a war with him.
The war in Europe has ended. Unconditionally and finally, our German enemy has surrendered to the people of all three nations.
When the war ended, he came back to Britain not having fought a professional fight for well over a year, without any warm-up whatsoever. Within a matter of days of his return, his manager had matched him to fight for the world light heavyweight title against Gus Lesnovich. He'd not had the chance to train, can't have been that fit. It just kind of defies belief that that could have happened today. It just couldn't happen today. Lesnovich was a very top-class performer and was a big favourite to beat Mills. He had won the title in 1941, so he'd been champion for 5 years.
Freddie Mills is down.
Freddie was battered, senseless in the second round, and Lesnovich absolutely, it was a terrible hiding he gave poor Freddie.
He was put down in the second round 4 times. The bell rang for the third round. Everybody thought this would be the last. Mills was finished.
He was like a roaring lion.
He won the third round. He won the third round by meeting Lesnovich head on and fighting him back. And Lesnovich was shocked to think that Mills was still had so much fight left in him. And this was so typical of Mills. By the 10th, Mills was tiring and Lesnovich could see that. What courage Mills showed in that fight. I mean, it summed up everything about this kind of the way the British perhaps looked at themselves at that time. They'd come through great adversity, and here they were in one of the biggest events after the war, watching one of their own do something pretty similar. He gave his all.
Lesnovich must have a dickens of a right hand, because this morning I woke up with quite a headache. However, I hope Lesnovich will give me a return contest pretty soon, and I'd like to box him again.
Freddie Mills had told me once, in strict confidence at the time, that he was never the same fighter after his first fight with Lesnovich. He took terrible punishment, and he said after that he was continually getting headaches. Freddie said to me one day, I think I've had a very mild brain hemorrhage. Of course, he didn't want to broadcast it because he would have been stopped boxing immediately, and understandably, just coming out of the RAF, he wanted to get some money.
Not many men took the sort of punishment he did and came out of it without some pretty severe effects.
He did begin to develop chronic headaches, doubtless caused by his boxing career. In a witness statement to police, his wife Chrissy said that on the day he died he had been suffering from headaches.
It's said the blows that he received in his career, which were considerable, could cause a person to suffer from depression. And so it's eminently possible that he could have decided to end it all.
The only evidence we have of Freddie Mills suffering brain damage was his recurring headaches, but they could have been due to stress anyway. I wouldn't be at all surprised if Freddie Mills did the last dozen or so of his fights against his better judgment. But knowing the lure to be one of the best boxers in the world was so overwhelming, he just had to carry on.
We're fighting Freddie Mills July 26th in White City Stadium, right?
Yeah.
And we expect a good hard fight, and I know Freddie will be in there punching, and so will I. And I think the best man will win.
When Mills fought Lesnovich in 1948 in the rematch for the World Light Heavyweight title, it greatly captured the public's imagination.
Buzzing, absolutely buzzing. I close my eyes and I'm looking down a camera lens. I'm looking into where the ring would have been and what's sitting there, and I can see the smoke coming up because there's so many people in there smoking, and the noise, you can't hear yourself talking, you know, in the early stages.
And I was allowed to stay up and listen to the fight on the radio. It was one of these, it's one of those new-fangled, small, portable radios, so we had it literally in the middle of the table. The adrenaline just got more and more and more. It was almost unbearable.
For Britain to have the World Light Heavyweight fight in London against the reigning champion from America was a big event. The Americans had kind of run the sport throughout the 20s and 30s, and if you wanted to win, you had to go over there to do so.
Boxing was a shady sport. I mean, there was so-called mafia involvement right up until the sort of late 1960s.
Benny Hampman, manager of many famous boxers.
My father. He was a boxing manager, promoter, agent.
He brought Gus Lesnovich over here to fight for
the money that was going backwards and forth over the Atlantic. They used to take the cream off the top of the takings, off the ticket sales. They took money off of the fighters, off the managers. It was running all the boxing records.
I was writing boxing at the time Benny Hampman was around, and he was considered a bit of a shady figure in this country. He was there in the background of anyone else of that era who was bigger than Freddie or had more entertainment value.
We sometimes had to do a number, and he never knew the words. He never knew it. He just mumbled everything. He never knew a bloody word. It was a terrible mess. But, that made it even funnier.
I came from Winklesea on the London TV. When we're having our Winklesea, we turn the telly on and just watching old Grandma. You know the winner!
He was the happiest man I've ever met. Everything. He was just so glad to be involved in what we were doing. He was just fun to be with.
That's the last time I ever come in this here shop. Oh!
he started going into films.
How'd you like to make an extra 50 quid tonight?
How do I do that?
Take a dive in the third.
Well, what do you take me for? Listen, I may be on the way down, but I've never thrown a fight
No,
yet.
don't be a dope. You can't win tonight anyway. You haven't got a chance with Booth.
He could genuinely act, and he was a personality in his own right.
Over to Freddie Mills' restaurant in Soho, where the waiter finds it difficult.
There was no Chinatown in those days at all. But of course then lots of Chinese people coming from Hong Kong, starting up business, Chinese restaurants. So Freddie said, okay, well, let's do something different with the place. And they turned it into a nightclub called the Freddie Mills Night Spot.
Mr. Freddie Mills.
It was like everybody's idea of what a nightclub should look like. And come and do a turn at the opening night. I mean, it attracted every kind of clientele.
The Krays were frequent visitors when we first opened the club. And they were all very, very smart men that were there. You know, they used to come about 7 or 8 handed.
These photos are from Freddie Mills' nightclub, yes. That's me, Reggie, Freddie Mills, Ronnie Kray. We were all pleased to be there and couldn't wait to get a photo and show it to everybody. Look, that's me with Freddie Mills. He was a man to be respected and practically worshipped. You know, he was. No doubt about it.
I think he really thought, this is it, this is the next stage of my life, I'm going to be a success and I'm not going to have any problems. He couldn't have been more wrong.
Freddie Mills had celebrity friends, he had those celebrity contacts, and he was seen as part of that entertainment industry, but his sort of shining light was on the wane as time started to pass.
The strange thing is, his television work seemed to dry up. He was missing from our screens.
Freddie Mills, when he was young, was the most happy fella. He was always smiling, always wisecracking, and just wanted fun. He was a fun guy. And he became, to me at the end, a rather sad man. And, you know, that's when I noticed he used to get depressed.
I think what Freddie hadn't prepared himself for was that, you know, being an actor, being an entertainer, you're not employed all the time. There are going to be periods where you're out of work. There's going to be periods where you'll be sitting by the phone waiting for your agent to ring. And it really, really rubbed him up the wrong way, the fact that he had to do that. It's such a fleeting thing, fame. Unless you're in the public eye, day after day after day, you're soon forgotten.
I'll tell you what happens. When you're right at the top, you get invited everywhere. You never have to buy a lunch or a dinner. People say, you must come to this, you must come to that. But when you're on the slide, you have to go and buy your own lunch. It's not easy to take. Some people can't take it. You can't take it.
We do have to bear in mind that Freddie Mills was prone to gloomy moods. He was prone to having bouts of depression. And people, when they get depressed, do kill themselves. It is incredible that he had as much success as he did. He rose as high as anybody can. And on the way down, to suffer depression would almost be an inevitable consequence, now wouldn't it? So the coroner's verdict of suicide seemed entirely plausible. Just because a verdict is plausible doesn't mean to say it's right. And there is another aspect to consider. What was Freddie Mills's demeanour like on the day that his life was ended?
For me, there was no mystery. It's just a matter of who was actually responsible.
Logistics of holding a rifle to your eye are hard enough as it is. And then to have had time somehow to have put it next to them, leaned rather neatly, seems very odd.
It was, and I said this before, it was almost as if the scene had been stage managed.
Although there were sort of hints that there was actually potentially more to it, that didn't seem to be taken particularly seriously.
The gangsters who were actually sweeping through Soho faster than any of the others were the Richardsons. They were the cold, calculating gang from South London. And they were the ones who would not have cared about Freddie Mills' reputation. They would not have cared about who he knew.
The Richardsons had a penchant for torturing people. Were a bit unsavoury. You don't really want to get anywhere near them or hear anything about them or anything. I didn't, you know, and they were in the West End. They were all over the place, the Richardsons, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm Edward Richardson, yeah. You do get a certain reputation if you've, you know, been in some various tussles, which we had been in. When I come home after my first sentence, I was a bad boy in prison. I lost 450 days remission. I've never heard of anyone losing that much remission before, but I was in a mutiny at Durham and tied a couple of screws up, tried to escape, and all sorts of other skullduggery. So that's how I lost a lot of remission. But I was in special security wings at the time. You know, I was away with everybody. Train robbers, I know them all, Charlie Bronson, everyone. So you'd have a reputation, yes, quite right. You know, if someone took a liberty, you know, they got their comeuppance. That was all.
And then you had the Kray twins, who were just moving into this area. They didn't have a huge sway in Soho, but they had a lot of influence within the boxing world and the show business world.
There was a hell of a lot of information that said that the Krays were involved in Freddie Mills' death.
A lot of people have got the impression that Clubland, London, is very tough. Do you think it is? You run a couple of clubs.
I don't suppose it can be that bad, else people wouldn't go to them, really, would they?
They were notorious gangsters. That was a bit of a religion with them. To be gangsters, it was something they were quite proud of, and they wanted to be the best gangsters, which ain't always easy.
Ronald, what do you think about Clubland in London?
Well, I think most clubs are very respectable, you know, and I don't think there's any trouble at all in them, except occasionally.
I spent a lot of time with them and did a lot of work with them in the line of fraud. And it was useful to have people like them if anybody complained.
It's not that surprising that Freddie Mills ended up in a seedy place like Soho. Although he was a huge figure, he nonetheless was involved with boxing. Boxing segued into criminality on all levels, and it's actually questionable as to whether he wasn't a little bit naive about it and possibly didn't understand the connotations of entering that den of iniquity. Yeah, this was a den of criminals who were out to help themselves, and they didn't care who they trampled over.
I remember Freddie Mills, he was a hero of mine at the time when I was a youngster, yeah.
What do you think when people say about the Richardsons being responsible for Freddie's death?
It's rubbish. I think he committed suicide. He'd had enough of it, or whatever, for some reason.
Do you know if the Kray twins were demanding protection money from Freddie Mills?
Well, I asked you if you sort of was going in for protection money, you wouldn't want to go to Freddie Mills, would you? I can protect you, so we send Nobby Clark up here, he was 5'1", I think, you know, to look after you. It's a joke, you know, to talk about protecting Freddie Mills. From what? You know.
I think I've said enough, to be quite honest. I've said more than enough. More than enough.
Shepherd's Bush, West 12, London's most modern police station. Here, under the old Vine Street blue lamp, for the last 30 days, a specially picked murder squad has been grappling with one of the most sordid, brutal and baffling crimes of all time.
Between 1959 and 1965, 8 prostitutes were murdered in the Hammersmith area of West London. Their bodies were stripped after death, and because of that, the press, who loved nicknames, dubbed the killer Jack the Stripper. A book has been written about the secret life of Freddie Mills, and in it the author states that Freddie Mills was Jack the Stripper.
I'm Michael Litchfield, author of the book The Secret Life of Freddie Mills, boxing hero, rather boxing champion, national hero and serial killer. I would say, if asked, how certain am I that Freddie was Jack the Stripper? I would say 80%.
Do you think it's fair to say that your book is written in a way that seems like you're 100% sure?
Yes. Yes.
Why is that?
Well, it had to be, in my mind, a work attempted at a definitive resolution. But looking at it subjectively now, as somebody like yourself, looking at it, I can see there are holes. There are still holes. However much I felt at the time, it's 100% there.
Freddie Mills was never, ever considered to be a suspect.
There are so many loose ends with this particular case. There are questions that haven't been answered.
And that just added to the rumours and innuendo that swirled around Freddie's memory following his death.
They can take you away from the real source of the person who was responsible for an offence.
I don't know if the truth will ever come out.
I religiously believe this is what happened to Freddie. Freddie laid a bet, and what he laid was his life, and that's eventually what happened to him. He laid his life down and it cost him his life. Big mistake, big mistake.
Given the background of where this information comes from, the gravitas of the people providing the information, I have no doubt that this is the answer to a mystery that's gone on for decades.
I don't know how long I'm going to live, I've diabetes, I'm 75 now, so let's get the story out, and at least it's helping the Mills family. I'm not in denial anymore about my father, about what he did and what happened with Mills. I first met Freddie round my father's home. They became good friends after the Lesnovich fights. So they've been friends for years. It's as if all his problems had melted away. That night, I was working at the Big L Club, running the tables. My father's supposed to have gone to them Freddie the £2.5 grand. And about 4 o'clock in the morning, my father's walked in with this old guy, Sally the murder. And I didn't think anything of it. It didn't cross my mind that anything could happen to Freddie. All of a sudden, this massive guy has come over to my father and whispered in his ear. He's turned around and told the table, Mills is dead, he's gone, he's finished. And this old guy, there was like a smirk on his face. Later I found out it was Mayor Lansky. Coincidence? I don't think so. But I'd be prepared to meet them and say face to face to them rather than on a camera. I'm Roger Hunt. It's very sad circumstances we're meeting under for the first time.
Did you actually get a call from the police?
No, nothing.
No, you didn't. So.
Nothing. They couldn't care less. Yeah, they don't want to know. They don't want to. I mean, because there'd been be a big police investigation into everything, and back in them days, and they didn't want it. They wouldn't have wanted it.
Okay. If I decided that your story is true, this far away from the event, nothing I can do about it.
Nothing I can do about it. If I'd have known this was how serious this was with Freddie and my father, and I'd thought for 1 minute, 1 millisecond, that I could have changed events.
Yes.
I would have done, Don. It's just been a pleasure meeting you, Don, and as I said, I hope in some small way I've been able to help you and Freddie's family. And at least, in my mind, I believe I've now been able to help you with the truth.
1919 to 1965. In loving memory of Freddie, a husband and a father who was loved and adored.
It's hard to believe that it's 51 years ago.
And we drove out of the gates, and I think of the whole of the street was lined with people. And there was a bus conductor on the corner of the road there. And as soon as the hearse drew up to him, he stood to attention and went. Now that's a...
Kieran, and did he look like Freddie? Did he fight? He's a fighter.
Me and my brother Leo resemble him quite a lot.
My grandfather inspired me to box. The only thing is, it's in the blood. It's the only sport that I've ever enjoyed, the only thing that I love doing, the only thing I have a passion for is boxing. And I think it all stems from my grandfather.
Tonight, Freddie Mills, this is your life. I'm not joking.
I'd rather have had my father for 13 years than any other father for a lifetime. It's a shame we didn't get to have him for a lifetime.
He filled our lives with joy. I'm honoured to have spent that time with him, really, because he was a very special.
Oh, I wish I could do it all over again. It was such a great thrill to me.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section. I hope we see you there.